Well, we've come to the end of the series of Unlocking the New Testament, and we finish with a climax and probably one of the most difficult books of the New Testament. And yet, perhaps we make too much of a meal of it sometimes. I heard of some theological students in America, and they'd been receiving lectures on the book of Revelation, among other books, and they were all confused and they were in turmoil, so they decided to go and have a game of basketball. And they went to a gymnasium on the college campus, and they were playing basketball together, and they noticed that the janitor or the caretaker was sitting in a corner waiting to lock up when they were finished, and he was reading his Bible. So after they'd finished basketball, they went over and said, well, you're a Christian, are you? You read your Bible? And they said, yeah. He said, yes. And they said, what are you reading? He said, the book of Revelation. They said, and you understand that, do you? Oh, he said, of course I do. And they said, well, what does it mean? He said, simple. Jesus wins. And that is the message of the book of Revelation in a nutshell. I like it. Sometimes it takes a simple soul to tell us the real meaning of a book. That is the theme of Revelation. Jesus wins. Well, again, you can whisper hallelujah if you feel like it. But Jesus wins. The victory is his. He's coming back to do so. Nevertheless, it is a strange book. When you first read it, it is so unusual. And opinions, again, have varied tremendously. I just jotted a few down. Here are some human opinions about it. First, of a rather low kind. There are as many riddles as there are words. Another said, it's a farrago of baseless fantasy. Not very complimentary. A haphazard accumulation of weird symbols. It either finds a man mad or it leaves him mad. And again, I'm afraid Martin Luther said it was better not in the New Testament. Well, it teaches us not to regard any Christian teacher or leader as infallible, doesn't it? Others said it's not even should not even be a biblical book. But on the other hand, there are some very high opinions I jotted down. The only masterpiece of pure art in the New Testament. And I remember at one stage, members of our church, the young people, did a musical, a 3-hour musical called Children of the King. And it finished up with a ballet of the Antichrist. And boy, was that powerful. We had a total of 10,000 people came to see that. And it was a powerful presentation of the whole battle in the Bible that finishes up with the ascension and the second coming of Christ and the great victory over Antichrist. It was a powerful presentation. And of course it lent itself to the visual arts because it's a musical book. It's full of songs and it's full of pictures and artwork. It really lends itself to the media. Another person said, it's infinitely worthwhile to wrestle with until it gives its blessing and opens its riches. Another says it's beautiful beyond description. So we have a wide range of opinion here from the bottom to the top. What is Satan's opinion? I've given you human opinions, but what about satanic? He hates this book. He absolutely hates it. He hates the first few chapters of the Bible and the last few because they give the whole game away. They tell you how he got into our situation and they tell you that he's going to be thrown out of it. You know, we prayed about electronics earlier. Actually, I didn't feel led to pray against Satan because I felt our prayers were needed by the team who were working on it, and the prayers were answered in exactly that way. But Satan does interfere with electronics, and one of the tapes I made on the book of Revelation was about Satan's downfall in Revelation 20, and for 7 minutes I described his downfall. Do you know we had problem after problem with that particular tape? And we had tapes returned again and again. Tape is faulty. How dare you sell a tape of such bad quality? And they left us in perfect condition. There's a family down in Brighton, Methodist family, just become Christians, the whole family. And they were listening to that tape, and when it got to that 7 minutes of Satan's downfall, they couldn't hear me. They could hear my voice in the background, but over my voice was a loud foreign tongue shrieking at the top of their voice and drowning out everything I said for 7 minutes. Well, they got a bit frightened. They sent for the Methodist minister, and he came, and he said, well, play it through to me. And when they played it the second time, those 7 minutes were totally wiped out and blank. So we're not playing games. I know what Satan's opinion of this book is. He will try and convince you it's far too difficult for you to understand. He'll keep you right out of it if he possibly can. And he's succeeded with all sorts of Christians all over the place who don't touch this book now and just ignore it. Even some great preachers never preach from the later chapters of this book, which is tragic. What's the divine opinion of this book? Well, we know because he says, at the beginning he says, there's a blessing for everyone who reads this book, and a blessing for everyone who reads it to others, which is interesting. So if you want a real blessing, go and read the whole book of Revelation to someone else. And at the end of the book, there's a curse. And the curse is this: God says, if anyone takes anything out of this book, or adds anything into it that's not there, I will take away his share in the tree of life and in the holy city. So God says, don't you dare meddle around with this book. You take it as it is. So there's a blessing and a curse attached to this last book in the Bible, which is not attached to any other book. That's God's opinion. So we've heard human opinions, satanic opinions, now a divine opinion. And that makes it a pretty important book, because it's the only book that tells us the future. It's the miracle of prophecy. And the miracle of prophecy is that it's history written before it happens. Now, the Bible is a predictive book. It's full of predictions about the future. 1 in 4 verses of the Bible contains a prediction about the future. And altogether, 735 separate events are predicted about the future in the Bible. And of these, 596 have already taken place to the letter. So the Bible is 81% fulfilled. I didn't say 81% accurate, because most of the others are about the end of the world. There are less than 20 yet to be fulfilled before Jesus gets back. So we're well through the predictions. But most of them are about the future, and most of them are about the end of the world, and most of them are in the book of Revelation that are not yet fulfilled. Now, there are extremes of interpretation which we've got to avoid. There is what I call the grossly literal. It is obvious that many of the things in this book are symbolic and not to be taken literally. They are picture language. But when we talk about the future, which is unknown, you have to use picture language to communicate what is difficult to understand. But it would be a mistake to treat it in a grossly literal way. But equally, at the opposite extreme, is what I call the grotesquely allegorical way of spiritualizing it all. And there's a balance, and we'll talk about how to get the balance right as we go through it. Now, what sort of a book is it? And there are a number of answers that I want to give you. First of all, it is what we call an apocalyptic book. Now, apocalypsis is a Greek word which means unveiling. They would use it of the queen unveiling a tablet bearing her name. It is a drawing back of the curtain. And the one veil that hangs over our knowledge is the veil that hides the future from us. And an apocalypse is an unveiling of the future, a drawing back of a curtain so you can peer into things that other people don't know about and can't see. It is above all an unveiling of Jesus. It is an apocalypse of Jesus, a revelation of Jesus, an unveiling of a Jesus you've never seen before. And the description of Jesus in chapter 1 is different from what he appeared when he was on earth. And above all, it's an unveiling of a Jesus who rides on a horse and not a donkey, who comes to fight, not as the Prince of Peace, but comes to make war. It's a new side to Jesus. It's an unveiling of a side of Jesus that you didn't know about from the Gospels. Because in the Gospels he came not to judge, but to save. But this time he's coming to judge. And a horse is a symbol of war, whereas a donkey was a symbol of peace. And he did come as the Prince of Peace the first time, but he comes as the man of war, to make war on all evil and deal with it once and for all. Thank God he made it that way round. I'm so glad he came on the donkey first, to make peace between us and God. But the next time he comes, it'll be a very different Jesus. Won't unbelievers get a shock when they see this Jesus and see the full side of his character, how he loves sinners, but how he hates sin? And we shall see on his second visit how much he hates sin and evil, whereas we saw on the first how much he loves sinners. Now, apocalyptic is a unique form of literature. It's all about the great spiritual battle between good and evil that's going on. It's always written in an atmosphere of struggle and war. And then the outcome of that war is always that good triumphs over evil. And so we have 4 themes in apocalyptic literature. Retribution for evil. Someday the Lord comes to deal with evil, to punish it. And that note is always sounded in the unveiling of the future that we call apocalyptic literature. The second is the opposite of that. It's the time also of reward for good. In other words, it's the time of judgment, when good is rewarded and evil punished. And apocalyptic always unveils that judgment is an essential element of the future that's coming. But the third note that's always sounded is a note of renovation, that things are going to be made new. And this word new, which hardly ever occurs in the Old Testament, always occurs in apocalyptic, because there's something new coming. And in the book of Revelation, God says, "Behold, I make all things new." Now that's an apocalyptic note that is sounded. And the last one that's always sounded is that God is going to reign, that it's the rule of God that's coming. God's going to take over the government, and he will reign forever and ever. And so you get lovely songs celebrating these 4 things in the book of Revelation. The Hallelujah chorus celebrates the first. Did you know that when you hear Handel's Hallelujah, 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 you know that thing, gets you all going, doesn't it? Do you know what it's about? It's celebrating the collapse of the world's stock exchanges, the collapse of the world economy. You look at the context in Revelation 19. It's celebrating the fall of Babylon and the collapse of trading and money marketing. Well, I don't think the stock exchange will be singing the Hallelujah chorus when that happens, but we will. We're celebrating the fact that God's dealing with this materialist system that has corrupted so many. Hallelujah. We're singing hallelujah because now the saints are going to be crowned. We're singing hallelujah because now everything's going to be new. We're singing hallelujah because the kingdoms of this world have become the kingdom of our God and of his Christ, and he shall reign forever and ever. No wonder it's packed with songs and music. A real musical book, this. So that's apocalyptic, this unveiling of this future with these 4 notes always being sounded. Now there are some apocalyptic chapters in other books of the New Testament, and there are some apocalyptic sections of the Old Testament, notably in Ezekiel and Daniel. But it's these 4 notes that always sound in this unveiling literature. Now the second thing we want to say is that it is a symbolic book, full of symbols. Well, no, the way this is done, actually I'm going to take this second, sorry. Let's move this way. The second thing is, it's an ecstatic book. Now, what do I mean by that? Who was the author of it? Well, the first answer to that is John, the beloved apostle, now in prison. His body's in prison, his mind is in the Bible, his heart is in the churches, and his soul is in the Spirit. That's his location for this book. Let's run through them. His body's in prison. You can go to Patmos today and they'll show you the cave up on the mountain where John was supposed to have been chained when he wrote this book. That's where his body was. His mind was steeped in the Bible. Perhaps one of the reasons Christians don't understand it is that there are 400 references to the Old Testament. And the better you know your Old Testament, the more you'll understand Revelation. If you're not very good at the Old Testament, there are a lot of things in Revelation will escape you. This man was steeped in the Scriptures. Can't write a verse without some reference to the Scriptures. 400 references to the Old Testament. So that's where his mind is. Where is his heart? It's with the 7 churches that he's unable to meet with on Sunday morning. It's the Lord's Day, it's Sunday morning, and he can't go to church because he's chained. And his heart's with the 5, 6, 7 congregations in Asia Minor that he was used to preaching around. They're all within almost visible distance of each other, a group of 7 churches that clearly were a circuit for this preacher, and he can't go. So his heart's there. Where is his spirit? He says, I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day. And therefore he had out-of-the-body experiences. He was caught up to heaven. He saw all sorts of things from that little cell on the little island of Patmos, which is now no more than a holiday resort in your tourist brochure. Well, John was the author, or was he? It mentions an angel. In fact, lots of angels. There are lots of angels in this book. And in fact, an angel was going to conduct John around, take him on a trip to heaven, show him things on earth. And the angel was giving him all this. And in fact, the angels, we'll see, were the ones who were going to take what he wrote and pass it on to the churches. And it looks as if God had given an angel to each church to look after that church. Listen, whenever you worship, you should remember we're with angels. If people say, how many were with you at Highly, say thousands. See? I'm serious, because the Anglicans have got it in their liturgy. I wonder if they really believe it. They say every time they come to communion, therefore with thy angels and archangels, we laud and magnify your holy name. Well, that's the literal truth. And the angels even look at our hairstyle. Did you know that? When Paul talks about the length of men's and women's hair, he says because of the angels. So the angels can be offended by the way we behave in church. And you know, when just one sinner repents, they throw a party up there. They really do. They have a celebration. And the angels are very real here, and it's angels who reveal to John these visions. And it's angels who are the postmen who take what he writes and takes it to the churches. And each angel takes it to the church that God has told them to look after. I wonder if your church will meet its angel. Well, you will when you get to glory. You'll find out that there have been angels watching over you all your life. You didn't know it. Claim it. But it's Jesus Christ, surely, who is the author. It's the apocalypse of Jesus. It's what he is revealing. Yes, that is also true. But ultimately, we've got to say God is the real author. This is his word. He's giving it by his Holy Spirit. It's part of God's Holy Scriptures. John is a prophet. It's the only fully prophetic book in the New Testament. Plenty of prophetic books in the Old, but this is the only fully prophetic book in the New. Now we can go to this third point. It is a symbolic book. It's full of symbols. And I've told you we shouldn't take them all literally. We shouldn't take them all allegorically. We should work our way through each symbol carefully. And let me just give you one or two pointers. First of all, some symbols are perfectly obvious. Books are opened on the day of judgment. That symbol is perfectly obvious. They are big red books, and they have 4 words on the cover. This is your life. Only it will not be a half hour of selected nice bits. It will be your total biography. Everything you've said and thought and done and felt. And woe betide you if a book is opened entitled This Is Your Life on the day of judgment. How would you feel if everything you'd ever done was now being put on this screen as a film for all of us to see? Or everything you've ever heard being played on a tape recorder for us now? Or everything you've ever said being played? You know, somebody once said if everybody knew what each had said of the other, there wouldn't be 4 friends left in the world. Element of truth in that, I'm afraid, isn't there? All right. The books, the lake of fire, that's pretty obvious because we know from Jesus, the great white throne. These are pretty obvious symbols. We know what they stand for. You don't have to explain them. So we start with the obvious ones. Then there are some symbols that are explained. For example, in the first chapter, 7 stars and 7 lampstands. And we have it explained. These are the 7 churches. And each is a lampstand, and the 7 stars are the angels that look after them. And Christ can remove the light from a lampstand so that it no longer shines. And alas, not one of these 7 churches is still shining. And God can close churches down and remove the lampstand. So that's explained. There are others that are explained. Incense is explained as a symbol of the prayers of the saints rising to heaven. The white linen is explained as a symbol of the righteous deeds of the saints, the bride's dress, that she's getting herself ready for the wedding. So many symbols are explained. The dragon is explained as the devil. And then the 10 horns are explained as 10 kings. And the prostitute, there's a horrible figure of a prostitute woman, the scarlet woman, that is explained as symbolizing Babylon, that's focal center of the world's commerce. So we've got some symbols that are pretty obvious, some that are explained, some that are paralleled. And these are paralleled, especially in the Old Testament apocalyptic literature. They're paralleled in Daniel, Ezekiel, Zechariah, Isaiah, some of the Psalms, and Jeremiah. And since they're explained in the Old Testament, John doesn't bother to explain them in the New, because you can look up the parallel. By the way, the more you read the whole Bible through and through, the more you find it is a self-interpreting book. This bit explains that bit, and this bit illuminates that bit. And that's the big advantage of reading the Bible through and through, because it interprets itself. And so there are some symbols that are paralleled in the Old Testament. And finally, there are some that are obscure that I can't even explain to you. There are altogether, by the way, 300 different symbols in the book of Revelation. The obscure ones, some of them have to wait until we find out. Jesus says, I'll give a white stone to those who overcome. I'm not sure what that means. I've got at least 5 theories, but I'll know when I get a white stone. In other words, there are some we'll have to wait before we find the full meaning. 1 or 2 other very obscure symbols, the winepress, the 2 witnesses, who are they? A whole lot of things like that. And I think we've got to have a reverent agnosticism at some and say, I just don't know yet, but I believe later I'll understand. But most of those 300 symbols we can work out if we are prepared to do a bit of study in our Bible. Now I want to say it's a historic book. And I mean by that it comes out of a particular background. Let us say that this book was written for Christians under persecution. And that is why we don't find it very helpful, because we're not in that situation. It's for those who are really under pressure. It's the favorite book of Christians in China, for example, especially when I tell you that the People's Government in Beijing has 666 seats in it. You can imagine what they make of that. But it's actually when you're really being persecuted officially by the political leaders that you really begin to understand the message of this book. It's written for people in that condition. To us, it's a bit of an academic or intellectual exercise to unravel it all. But to people under persecution, it really speaks to them. It's almost as if you've got to be persecuted before you understand this book. That's what it's really written for. But looking at the political scene, there is now, it was written a bit later than the previous books we studied, and now we have other emperors in Rome, Vespasian, Titus, Domitian, and it's under Domitian that the real heavy persecution came. And so in the background of this book is this dreadful persecution by the Roman authorities. And usually Rome is here referred to as Babylon, just to kind of put it in a code so it doesn't look too obvious. But Domitian, the emperor, was a totalitarian dictator. He was a Stalin. He was a Hitler. And the Christians really suffered. It was during his reign that this book was almost certainly written. That's the political. The social side is astonishingly contemporary. This is the human side of the book. And the social side, commerce and culture were the 2 big words. And Rome was becoming richer and richer because of all the trade that flowed through the metropolis along those roads. Rome was never richer than in the time of Domitian. And because there was so much money to spare, culture flourished, music, art, all forms of culture, the theater. And so culture and commerce were the big things that everybody wanted to get into. Strangely modern, all this. The religious side of it, well, the Gentile world was full of idolatry and syncretism, and now emperor worship. And once a year, every Roman citizen had to stand in front of the Roman flag or a bust of Caesar, raise their hand like that and say 3 little words, Jesus is Lord. And Caesar is Lord. Caesar is Lord. And if they refused to say those 3 words, they were put to death. One young mother who'd just given birth to a baby was told, now say those words. And what's 3 words once a year? Nothing. But her baby was taken from her and put in the next cell in the prison, and she was told, you can feed your baby as soon as you say Caesar is Lord. And she refused. Gradually she heard the baby's cries get fainter and fainter, but she still refused. And finally the baby died. And they took her out and they burned her alive on a red-hot sheet of iron. My Christians were tough, or loyal in those days. But just 3 words to save a baby. She said, no, Jesus is Lord. I refuse to say Caesar is Lord. That's the background religiously. And that's why Christians were now regarded as traitors, because they refused to say 3 words once a year. That really finds you out, doesn't it? Well, now, it is a prophetic book. We look now from the point of view of the divine. It is a prophetic book, and from the divine point of view, it's about the future. Now, at this point, I want to perhaps confuse you, I hope not, but I think I ought to do this, and tell you that there are 4 different ways of interpreting the book of Revelation. Before I come to those 4 ways, just wondering about the easiest way to tackle this. Let me just talk about this one first. There are a number of ways of writing history. There's a human way of writing history and a divine way. Once again, I'm working with the vertical line and the horizontal line, which keeps coming up in Scripture. This vertical line between heaven and earth, there and here, and this horizontal line of time, this is the vertical line of space, the horizontal line of time between the past and the now and the future and then. Now, do you see this yellow circle here? That is all that can be covered by human history. And every human history book, like Gibbon's Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, can only deal with the events of the past and present and what happens on earth. So human history, that's all that can be written in human history, and all history lessons in school are limited to that. But divine history is this circle. And divine history includes the future as well as the past, and what's going on in heaven as well as what's going on earth. Do you follow me? And the book of Revelation covers this history, whereas all human history books cover this. So divine history is total, and human history is only partial. The book of Revelation is total history, past, present, and future, and what goes on in heaven as well as what goes on earth. Indeed, as you read through the book of Revelation, sometimes you're in heaven, then you're in earth, then you're in heaven again, then you're in earth, then you're up into heaven, then you're down on earth. And we're constantly shifting scenes. Now, the big question in interpreting Revelation is, where does the book of Revelation come on this line? And that's where I'm afraid there are so many disagreements. Let's now go back to those 4 lines of interpretation so that I'm confusing you. The real question is, when is Revelation talking about? That doesn't make sense, does it? But what period of history is being covered in the book of Revelation? And you can buy a lot of commentaries on Revelation, but you'll find they drop into one of these 4 schools of interpretation. I'll tell you them all and then tell you which I believe is the right one. The first is called the preterist school, and it says that the whole book of Revelation is about the past. It's about the 1st century AD, and everything in it fits into that 1st century. It's a historical book. It's based on the 7 hills of Rome, and that's the location in space and in time. It's a first century history of what was going on in the Roman Empire. That's the beginning and end of it. Now that's the preterist school of interpretation, and most liberal scholars tend to go for that one. The second is the historicist interpretation, which says, no, this book is about the present, and it's about the 7 ages of the church. And it's not just about the 1st century AD, it's about all centuries AD. And so, for example, the 7 churches are divided up into the Ephesian period of church history, and were in the last the Laodicean churches. Have you heard that kind of teaching? Some of you have. In other words, the whole of Revelation covers the whole of church history. So what you really need is the book of Revelation in one hand and the Cambridge volumes of modern history in the other. And you find out we're in about volume 5 now, but we're in chapter 16. Do you see what I mean? It spreads the whole thing out, and you try and fit each chapter into one of the centuries. Now, I'm not convinced by that, because everybody who tries this way comes up with a different interpretation of which chapter we're living in right now. But you'll find commentaries that do this and try and spread the whole book of Revelation over the last 2,000 years and say, well, where are we in the whole program? The third interpretation is called the futurist, and this believes that the majority of Revelation has not yet happened, and that it's all about the last century AD. Now, are you following me? It's pretty complicated, this. Is it the 1st century AD? Is it all the centuries AD? Or is it the last century AD? In other words, is most of what it says past, or present, or future? And then, just to make it worse, there are some people who say, well, I take the idealist approach, which says that it doesn't refer to any particular time. You can apply its message to any century AD. And it's a picture of spiritual principles that apply to any time and place, so that it isn't to be tied down to any period of history. And it's just got a message for any time and any place. And it's just talking about 7 new things that we already experience. Well, where do we go from there? I have to say, I think there's an element of truth in all of them, but I would believe the major interpretation is this one, and that most of the book of Revelation has not happened yet, but will happen at the end of history. But it's obvious that the 7 churches of Asia do belong to the 1st century AD, for example, and that many things in the book of Revelation were true for their situation. It's not limited to that. That's the one that I find most unconvincing, trying to fit in, are we in chapter 16 now, or are we in chapter 17? Where are we on the clock? You get into such a quagmire of trying to apply it. I find that difficult. I find it forced. And this, I find, it puts it way up in another sphere. It makes it too airy-fairy. So I have to confess, I major that one with a bit of this one thrown in. But I can see that there are spiritual principles in it which could apply any time, and therefore, all through the last 2,000 years, the book has had some relevance. But I believe the majority of its information is yet future. Do you feel terribly confused? You don't. But I think it's important that you know the different ways people have tackled it. So that's an expansion of this bit down here. That the preterist deals with the past, historicist with the present, futurist with the future, idealist with the eternal, out of time altogether. Actually, that bracket is for these 3. These 3 deal with time. That one takes it as dealing with eternity. Well, now let's just try and see the structure. I've only got a few minutes in this talk to look at the structure. I've lost one. Here we are. we'll look at a simplified structure. It's so complicated that may look complicated, but I've tried to sort of give you the shape of it so that you can see the bones, the structure, the grouping of it. And I believe it simply falls into 3 sections. And each section moves you on to a new kind of thinking. And each section divides into 2 halves, and each half divides into 2 quarters. So that is the very simplest outline I can give you. I can give you a very much more complicated one. And it's useful to have more complicated ones, but that's the very simplest I could do. So the first section is the first 5 chapters, and I'm sure when you read it, you know that they're different from the rest. They start with a description of our ascended Lord, and then they talk about 7 assorted lampstands, those 7 churches. And we get letters to the 7 churches. Then chapters 4 and 5, which are favorite chapters to read in worship. You get a vision of God, the Creator on the throne, surrounded by worshiping creatures. And then in chapter 5, you get that matchless picture of a lamb looking as if it's been slain, who is yet a lion of the tribe of Judah, who begins to break the seals on the scroll on which God has written the final program of history, the countdown of world history. Now, I think everybody is happy up to the end of chapter 5, because it's quite straightforward and understandable and inspiring. And especially chapters 4 and 5, if the letters to the 7 churches are challenging, chapters 4 and 5 are uplifting. You get this tremendous sense of worship and everybody shouting hallelujah and the elders bowing down and the creatures praising God. It's a wonderful picture of worship before the throne, and you see the glassy sea and the sapphire throne and the rainbow around the throne. It's vivid, and it's a jolly good section to read when you're worshiping. But with chapter 6, suddenly the whole thing changes. And from chapter 6 through to 19, it's just one disaster after another. And many people get stuck in that middle section. They're all right up to here. And then suddenly we've got all sorts of terrible things happening. You see, what is happening is this. On that scroll is written the end of the world and the events of the end of the world. And to me, it's exciting. Just down the road from us is the Greenham Common Air Base, and the poor women living under cardboard outside the gate protesting against the cruise missiles. They're panicking because they're afraid that somebody will press the wrong button and start a nuclear holocaust. I'm not afraid of that because there's already a finger on the button. It's the finger of Jesus. God will not trust any other man to end history except Jesus. So it's he who breaks the seals and begins to unfold the countdown of history. But it's a pretty disastrous program that is unfolded. And we will stop there at the first talk, and we'll pick that up after we've had a break.